Dun 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 dun. Dun. This is the official intro music for Arthur Podcast, which is also known as the Peterborough Politics Podcast. That's not actually the official music. I'm lying to you, but we are planning to have all the fancy podcasting things like music in the future. So if you're listening to this and you say, "Hey, I have a beat that I made that would be perfect to this for this podcast," and you live in the Peterborough area and we can keep everything local, then that would be great. Please reach out to us and maybe we can collaborate. This podcast is recorded live on twitch.tv on my channel. My name is Danny Taro and my channel is my homie Tutaro. But it is also to be shared in other places like the Arthur website, which is trentarthur.ca, and also on Spotify. We're working to get it onto all the other podcasting platforms. But I just want to let you know that we are filming it live in front of a studio audience, you could say, and it is interactive. There are questions that people can ask both on Twitch and on Twitter ahead of time. So if you want to find us there, you can do so as well. Anyways, enough of me talking. Let's also let Sebastian introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Sebastian Johnston-Lindsay. I'm the coordinating editor of Arthur, and I'm just happy to be here. It's been a rough couple weeks. I can't lie, but I'm happy to be here because this is like a little sanctuary to come and sort of forget about what's happening on the outside world and sort of delve into the much more interesting political world of Peterborough City Hall and overarching politics of the city. Yeah.
That's right. This is the most interesting place to get your Peterborough news. And
Yes,
I can
I stand by that.
feel the tiredness in your voice.
Yeah. Well, I should start off by thanking you for the video that you did yesterday, going through some of the accusations that have been leveled against Arthur in the past little bit. I don't think we should probably delve too much into that here. I just wanted to say thank you for that. It's been a lot to deal with. I can think of better ways to spend a Saturday afternoon than writing a 3,500 word response to what amounts to libel. However, if that is the want of anonymous members of the Trent community, then they're free to do it. I just think that they probably have better things to do as well, you know?
Yeah, we might all have better things to do, but and so sorry that you have to go through that, and for the Arthur staff and the board and the writers, journalists, like it really is an unfortunate use of everyone's time.
Yeah. I should say too, like it reflects poorly on every member of staff, and you being one of the staff members as well, and it's really, really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And as easily disproven as those claims are, I just go to our website and see our financial statements. We have to take it seriously and respond to it and give it the weight that it's due there, right? Because it is, this information has power, and if you're not countering that power, then we as a newspaper aren't doing our jobs. So again, thank you for your solidarity in that. It's much appreciated.
Hey, no problem. You know what? I needed the content, so
Well,
so
there you
you
go.
know.
If nothing else, it provided you content, so that's
That's
good.
right. That's right.
It's all about the content.
I'm the one who's behind these secret allegations after all. I just needed the content that badly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Manufactured beef.
That would be amazing, but I honestly I really don't have time for that. That
Oh,
it's
imagine you
easy.
don't.
It's easy enough to find news in this world. You really don't have to make your own.
No,
And
there's
yeah,
quite
I agree. Like, I don't want this podcast space, to be a place where we talk about kind of like maybe personal beef or anything like that. This is a place where we're supposed to be talking about politics in Peterborough. So, what is going on with city council? Were you
Well,
at
that's a
the
good question.
meeting on Monday?
I was indeed, and it was a rather short meeting. It lasted an hour and 45 minutes, and so I was home by 8. Um, and yeah, it was an interesting meeting in a lot of respects. I kind of thought it might be a little bit more of a big deal, when you have the federal MP coming to speak and address council. You think maybe there's going to be some interesting back and forth, but that didn't really transpire. Michelle Ferreri, and I have an article that I've written. I've written 2 articles about this meeting thus far that we published yesterday. But yeah, her comments were rather lukewarm. She didn't have a lot of just really just providing some updates. It was about some of the major issues that she sees facing the community. She cited the housing crisis and affordability as 2 of the main things, and then talked about some meetings that she was having with the CEO of the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and others, and the minister Ahmed Hussein, kind of make these discussions transpire like at the federal level. Peterborough is submitting a housing grant related to a property at 681 Monaghan Road. And so she's in communications trying to make sure that the federal minister is aware that this is coming in. And so it was more or less just an update. It really didn't really amount to anything particularly newsworthy, other than the fact that we do have someone who's speaking to these people. It's important to note too, like Michelle Ferreri is a Conservative member. She's a member of the opposition in Ottawa, and so she comes at this all with a little bit of a bias, and she couldn't help taking some shots at the Liberal government throughout, right? And so one of the big one of the big things that she kind of talked about, and that she's talking to stakeholders in the community about, specifically like families. She's talking about affordability, and that the $100,000 dual income is no longer a sustainable means of supporting a family at this point. And so talking about fighting the carbon tax, and fighting back against the 6.3% tax increase to on alcohol. And from her background as a shadow minister for tourism, she's concerned about the implications of this tax increase on the tourism industry. So that's where she's coming from, right? That's solely, that's very much out of the Conservative playbook to fight any new taxes. And I mean, from my understanding, despite the fact this carbon tax has been upheld at very high level courts, if not the Supreme Court of Canada, they're still fighting that good fight. They're still going against
it's the same talking points we hear like every day. If you want election period, or see what the Conservatives are saying.
Yeah. So nothing really new or interesting. The one point, which is kind of a through line from Dave Smith's visit to council a couple of weeks back, was this battle against what Conservatives will call the catch and release program of bail in Canada, which is emanating out of Bill C-75. They're very, very upset about this. And the debate kind of rages on as to whether or not there needs to be reform to bail within Canada. It's important to note that Bill C-75 was put into place due to a decision from the Supreme Court of Canada to try and bring legislation into federal legislation in line with judicial decisions. So it's an interesting back and forth that I've been kind of tracing a little bit in the background, but that did come up. And the only person who actually asked any questions of Michelle Ferreri was Keith Riel, and specifically he asked about C-75, and he followed up with that with a question of what is the opposition doing to lobby the government for greater mental health coverage, or attention to issues of mental health. And
okay, hey, that's not a bad question, is it?
No, it's a good question from Keith Riel. The answer again didn't really give a lot of a new talking points. It's more or less just continuing to put pressure on the government. Again, there's some infighting there, because Riel said that this is a federal responsibility, and Michelle very quickly said no, it's a provincial responsibility. And if Dave Smith were there, he would say that it's a federal responsibility. So it's really just kind of the typical. No one really knows what they're doing, it seems like.
Right. Just political maneuvering. Everything good
Yeah,
that happens is my doing, and everything bad that happens is everyone else's fault at the other levels of government or the other parties. It sounds like the
yeah,
usual
yeah.
stuff.
That's basically what came out. So it was kind of difficult to write, a newsworthy piece about this because it is just such recycled material. So
Okay.
in that article, I talked about the waste management master plan, which was approved, and there were some very interesting delegations regarding that. And there's a lot of interesting online discourse about this as well.
Right. Do you want to get into
Yeah,
garbage now, or
I'm.
we also have like it was kind of like an all-star cast of city council.
It was. It
Um, I,
was.
I know we've talked about Michelle Ferreri, but do we want to talk about Diane Therrien and who am I thinking of?
Yeah. Stephen Wright.
Stephen Wright. That's right.
Yeah.
Or
Yes. Yeah.
we can say get into garbage. I don't know.
I feel like the garbage thing, coming from like I moved here from Burlington and we've had, the green bin pickup and biweekly garbage for as long as I can really remember. I do remember when it was first introduced. However, now to me it just seems so obvious. And so it's very interesting to be in Peterborough and see this debate unfolding. But we can talk about garbage later because I think
Right.
following up on the discussions and from last week, the Dave Hakey, I'm not going to apologize. Um, comments. That's probably a more interesting and topical discussion, perhaps. But
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like the garbage debate is kind of entertaining though.
it
Like
is.
it's
It
amazing.
is.
Again, like for me as well, someone who like grew up in Mississauga, it's been a thing there for so long. It seems very commonplace. But okay, we'll put garbage on hold. Save that garbage for later.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Diane Therrien and Stephen Wright both had delegations.
Yes.
Now, if you don't know, of course, Diane Therrien is the former mayor of Peterborough. Stephen Wright is the former city councillor who also ran for mayor opposing Jeff Leal in the recent municipal election. So people
Yeah.
who they know how the system works.
Pardon me.
People who know how the system works and what the
Yes.
city is
Yeah.
capable of. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like nice to see them come in and still show an interest and an influence over a city council.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it was kind of interesting to see because, to my knowledge, this is the first time that Diane Therrien, the former mayor, as you mentioned, has come back to address council since her term as mayor ended. Um, and so what this is all getting back to, right, is the question that Joy LaChica, Town Ward Councillor LaChica, put forward for the inclusion of the term race and cultural identity in the community safety and well-being plan, um, which caused some unfortunate back and forths at the previous council meeting or committee meeting.
Right. Most infamously, Dave Hickey saying that they don't need to apologize for being a white man.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So this is kind of they were speaking directly to the fact that this question as to whether or not to include that language in the community safety and well-being plan would be deferred pending a report or a report or presentation from Rima Lee, who is our diversity, equity, inclusion officer here in Peterborough. Um, and so, speaking directly to that point, I feel like the most powerful. I shouldn't say the most powerful because they were all really powerful delegations regarding this, because you could really feel like the palpable disappointment that people had that this was deferred, right? It seemed
Yeah.
to many people in the room, perhaps myself included, that it would make sense to do like this and then have Rima Lee come in and speak to the significance of this within the community safety well-being plan.
Okay. Oh, just pause for a second. Just so I want to make sure people in the audience know what exactly we're talking about. Um,
Mhm.
so just to make sure that I have it right as well, there was a motion, or sorry, there was language that was going into the plan that included like increased awareness about like diversity, inclusion, and equity, or like DEI,
Yeah.
right? And there was a motion to defer that language entering this legislation, or is it the community safety and well-being? What exactly is that?
So coming out of some provincial legislation from 2019, the Ontario government made it so that um, municipalities in Ontario had to develop what they called a community safety and well-being plan, which is an overarching vision for how they're going to ensure safety within the community. And what LaChica's motion kind of drew attention to was the lack of what she uh, termed as like she saw these issues of race and cultural identity as being implied throughout the document, and that these words appear, however, within the stated mandate of the um, of the leadership table, which is what this motion is really trying to create. This is a motion to create the leadership table to implement the CSWB plan.
Okay.
That it was lacking an overt recognition of the significance and its relationship to uh, community safety, right?
Right.
And so again, from last week, for those people who weren't listening last week, that she cited instances of violence which were predicated specifically on issues of race or cultural identity. So the attacks on Jagmeet Singh, for instance, or the continuing harassment at Betty Baker's drag story time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so somebody made a motion to defer this change.
Yeah, so that was Don Vasiliadis, who is I guess Monaghan ward councillor, and former chair of a committee having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's interesting that it would come from him on its face. However, the motion to defer whether or not to implement this change to the plan was passed. Like, this is like such deep down minutia. More or less what happened is, it's not like the motion has been lost, it's just been deferred until such a time that Rima Lee can come and speak to council regarding it, and then there's a good chance that it will be included. However, the delegations who came, so Stephen Wright and Diane Therrien being the most prominent within the Peterborough community who came to speak to this, said, why defer?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, like, what are they expecting to find as a result of this deferral?
That's a really good question. When I spoke to Mayor Jeff Leal after the meeting, he sort of told me that the main because eventually to add more layers of weirdness and confusion to this, at the meeting on Monday night, on February 27th, Council Joy LaChica again raised the motion to get rid of the deferral to allow for her to pass it again, which failed. And that failed by a vote of 6-5, right? And Mayor Leal voted against getting rid of the deferral. So I followed up with him afterwards, and his reasoning was interesting. And it's interesting in that, like, he's consistent about these kinds of things in the way that he operates. He told me that he wanted to give the opportunity for city staff, so Rima Lee in this instance, to speak to council regarding before they make a decision, and that he would abide by. He sees no issue in principle with the motion. However, he did want to hear from Rima Lee before implementing this or making a move on it, and that he has a lot of respect for the opinions of city staff. And so, again, we've talked about Jeff Leal being a very polished politician, and that he really doesn't do anything without thinking a few steps ahead to a certain degree. And so, like we talked about with the police budget, right? Like, he wanted to allow the new chief of police to come back and present the budget to council, right? And so this is kind of another it's consistent with his prior actions in council.
So basically, somebody brings something up and he says, well, let's talk to the person first. And then he defers, and then they talk to the person. And then, I mean, with the police budget, they just passed it verbatim without
Yeah.
changing anything. So we can kind of expect the same thing to happen here. I would be shocked if they actually didn't take this diversity, equity, inclusion stuff into consideration, right?
Yeah, it will be interesting. And part of what was interesting, and we still do need to talk about the delegations, but the follow up to this, and when Councillor Chica spoke to the motion and her reasoning behind wanting to again getting rid of the deferral and putting this in, is she told her fellow councillors that she'd went back and she'd done a deep dive into like the history and the provenance of the document, right? And that she understood, like I've already said, that there is a lot of language concerning diversity, equity, inclusion, and that the spirit of her motion is merely to bring it to directly to the forefront. So she kind of again said, look, I'm doing the work to understand where this came about. I understand the voices that went into this thing, but I still see that there's something missing here, right?
Right,
Um,
right.
and so that kind of granted some greater context to it. But it will be interesting to see what transpires when in March. I'm not quite sure which meeting that will be, but at one point Rima Lee will come forward and talk to council about it, and then inevitably this will be a motion that they have to vote on again at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of bureaucracy for
It's a stunning amount of
which
bureaucracy.
really constitutes to essentially just like acknowledging that like there are different intersections that are affected by the law and in Peterborough.
Yeah. And like I said last week, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a through line through our discussions, is that nothing happens quickly. And that my frustrations with the fact, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching are very frustrated by how slowly this happens,
Yeah.
but there's consistent discourse and recognitions of that process throughout. And it's really fascinating to watch it kind of play out in real time. It is for me. I don't know. It's probably infuriating for a lot of other people, but there is, a slow narrative towards some kind of hopeful, positive resolution to all of this. I
Right.
think I'm not certain the extent to which this would be, a big story had Dave Hakey not, done what he did, right? Like a quiet, typically speaking, I feel like a deferral on such a thing would be it would be interesting and newsworthy. However, I don't know if we'd be talking about it this much, However, I think
Yeah.
what Dave Hakey's comments sort of drew attention to was the absolute necessity of it, right?
Right.
Like I still would have written about it, but it wouldn't have been the news, really. I don't know if Diane Therrien and Stephen Wright would have come out had it not been such a massive explosion. They probably still would have, because it still stands to be said that the city of Peterborough has really done nothing official for Black History Month, and it is now March 1st. So I do think that that people would have come out and spoken to that. Because the
Yeah.
motion itself does reveal that. Yeah, it's
That is
slow.
pretty pathetic. Like I think, Black History Month is a great opportunity for people to virtue signal that they care about these things, and they couldn't even put in
Yeah,
that bare minimum kind of effort of even
yeah,
like something symbolic.
yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the notion of virtue signaling, because when Stephen Wright came up and he started his remarks by saying that I'm going to give you a lecture, right? And so he said a very like almost like professorial tone at the beginning, right? And he just went through talking about the fact like Black History Month isn't for him. I should say Stephen Wright is a Black man, right? So he's speaking from a point of from that perspective, right? Um, and he said it's not for Black people. It's for people like we know our history. We know when we were being excluded, and this deferral sort of echoes that sentiment, right? That we can be deferred, right? And then he talked directly about the seeming hypocrisy of not accepting this diversity, equity, and inclusion, the framing of race and cultural identity within the CSWB plan. The deferral of that followed immediately by the passage of Alex Berg's motion to make DEI training mandatory for all counselors. Right? He he spoke directly to the fact, like, well, if you were really serious about taking diversity, equity, and inclusion seriously, you would have passed the initial motion as well, in addition to making so that in addition to making diversity, equity, and inclusion training mandatory for counselors, right? So he kind of called them on their bullshit, right?
Yeah.
To not put too fine a point on it. Um, and I think he was, yeah, I mean, it was a very powerful delegation. All of the delegations that night were extremely powerful. Diane Therrien spoke. She began her remarks like, kind of talking more from her understanding as being a previous mayor and having a large part to play in the planning for this, right? And she talked about the need for greater council involvement in the actual leadership table, which is trying to be made to implement this plan as well. Yeah, interesting stuff, really.
Yeah, I mean I went through the tweets because unfortunately the video is not very accessible. But I was able to go through Joel's tweets, and I one thing that stood out to me is that Stephen Wright brought particular attention to being like you are lawmakers. Like if
Yeah.
anybody needs DEI training, it is the people who sit on city council.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
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 Can you elaborate on that at all? Like
Yeah, for
since you were
sure.
there?
So that's part of what he his overarching sort of message was that as leaders in the community, as elected officials, they have a responsibility to kind of to take this work and to demonstrate and be examples, right? To set forth the
Right.
policy others will have to follow, right? And that if they're not doing that work, then it makes it very difficult to expect others, really. Um, the other interesting thing, and this is connected to what the former mayor Diane Therrien talked about, was uh, she spoke to the significance of not only counselors but also city staff taking this training, right? So her suggestion was to
Right.
uh, from city staff, like council can't tell city staff to go and do this training, but she suggested that senior city staff, work amongst themselves to ensure that city staff is also receiving this training, and that's made mandatory moving forward,
Yeah.
right? That they have a better understanding when they're informing council on certain decisions that they're making, that this will have a greater sway. That these questions of diversity, equity, inclusion are being taken into account when city staff are informing council, right? And so all leaders in the community, right? And they have very palpable impacts on the way that we live our lives. And both Stephen Wright and Diane Therrien's comments spoke directly to uh, the fact that they if they're going to be elected officials, then they need to set an example. You know.
For sure. For sure. And the other thing that stood out to me was Diane Tyrion saying like, "Hey, this type of stuff, diversity, equity, inclusivity training tends to be like a one-off situation." And it's like and it's really not a great way to approach these things. You can't just take a 1 hour training session and be like, "Oh, I understand racism now." And I understand like
Yeah.
how systems of oppression affect certain groups of people. It doesn't really work like that, and I
No.
think that's tends to be how places of employment treat this training, and or even the idea that we can reform the police and somehow remove ourselves of the context of like colonialism and racism. Like this isn't really something that is can just be achieved by just doing like a training session, whether it's 1 hour or over 1 week or anything. So I
Mm.
really liked that she too kind of emphasized that like, yeah, like even if you do that training the one time, this is something that you should be constantly grappling with. And my concern really, because of the statement made by Dave Hakey, is that where like he really didn't even understand that he might have a certain type of privilege as a white person and as a man, you know, and it really showed the ignorance there. So I am happy, I guess, that this is maybe as you say, like in a way maybe it's better that it has blown up in the way that it has because it is now newsworthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not to say that it wouldn't be newsworthy, regardless. However, I think in a sick and twisted way, Dave Hakey kind of did us a favor here in that he exposed the issue point blank. Like you can't, it's not a nuanced discussion whether or not council needs diversity, equity, and inclusion training anymore.
Yeah.
Because very obviously, they do. And yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, Stephen Wright spoke directly to Hickey, like sort of again, not ideal, directly addressing counselors, but there was no, like, they didn't try to fight back on it like they may have in other situations, because it felt like I don't want to say it's reasonable, but it felt like this is something that had to happen, right? Based on on Hickey's previous actions. I will say, yeah, no, actually, I won't say that.
Say it. Come on.
No, no, no.
Rephrase it in a way that's not going to get you in trouble.
1 second. I'm gonna fact check it first.
All right, all right. I mean, I guess I
Right.
will say, if you want
I
to
just
take a moment to fact check. Oh, you did. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
you're that quick.
I've already
Wow.
fact checked it.
Journalism skills
Um,
over 9,000.
yeah. Well, I just have both my articles like up on my screen right here. So I want to say that Hakey did vote in favor of so I said that the motion to axe the deferral on this was lost 6-5. Hakey
Yeah.
was in favor. He voted in favor of getting rid of the deferral alongside LaChica, Crowley. Sorry, I should say their full names, shouldn't I? Joy LaChica. How am I forgetting his name? Matt Crowley.
Yeah, you can. I think you can say
Hakey.
Councillor LaChica, Councillor Crowley, because that actually
Yeah.
helps people be like,
Okay.
oh, that they're city councillor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
Councillors LaChica, Councillor Crowley, Councillor Beamer, which is interesting, Councillor Hakey, and Councillor Burke. It's
right.
worth noting that uh, Beamer, Councillor Beamer, and Councillor Andrew Beamer is Northcrest Ward Councillor, and Stephen Wright is a former Northcrest Ward Councillor.
Okay.
It's an interesting thing.
So maybe
So Hakey,
maybe Stephen Wright's delegation made an impact on Councillor Hakey and Councillor Beamer. We're
yeah,
both North End, correct?
yeah, former,
And so and yeah, I was shocked to see that they had voted in favor of this,
mhm.
and somebody like who is supposed to be progressive in so much as liberals are progressive, which is a debate on itself, but Mayor Jeff Leal voted
Yeah,
against it, and he would have been the tiebreaker to switch it over, so it would be six
yeah.
five, not 5-6.
I mean, even if Mayor Leal had voted, it would have been tied and it would have lost. So
Okay.
unfortunately, yeah,
Right,
we would have
right.
had to bring some more on side there.
Oh yeah, my math is off there. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
no
right.
worries.
So,
That's not my
uh,
strong point either.
unfortunately, yeah, tiebreakers they go to the
They're just lost motions if
the
they're tied.
naysayers.
Yeah, yeah. An example of that was when last year voting again on providing funding for the coalition of community groups to create a winter homelessness strategy in the city. Um, Kevin Duque declared a conflict of interest, and the motion was lost on a 5-5 tie.
Right.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So,
what happened with ties. Yeah,
okay, well
Recall.
that's an interesting I think way I guess we will be following this cuz
Yeah,
it's been deferred,
it's been
and
deferred, so
and
there's
we
been
will.
no real decision as to whether or not this will be included.
Yeah.
More will be revealed, as they say.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we have about 23 more minutes.
Mhm.
And we also have some questions from the audience. So we should probably start getting into the filth, which is to say, the
Sounds
garbage.
good. Yes. Yes.
What is going on? Why are people so worried that somehow Peterborough is going to be taken over by rats and dirty diapers and dog poo? Are we going to be okay?
Based on my experience living in a municipality that had this very same system of garbage collection, living in a suburb, growing up in my parents' home, I think we're going to be okay.
I think
I think we'll be just fine.
the world
Um,
isn't gonna fall to shit, quite literally.
no, and no, it's been an interesting tone because one of the delegations struck me. I don't know if it's just like I'm not mature enough. Struck me as kind of funny because they talked about the fact that they were emailing um articles about like the correlation between and it's a very real issue. Like I'm not laughing at the it's just the topic of conversation struck me as particularly kind of humorous. The fact that you're discussing this with a city councillor. But no, it's very reasonable questions that have been arising in other municipalities, I think, regarding the amount of used diapers that are ending up having to be stored for weeks on end, and then asking legitimate questions about how this is going to be addressed, specifically in Peterborough, who has a above average number of elderly folks living in our community, right? Um, it's a reasonable question, right? And also bringing up the question of whether or not people like low income individuals, people living on fixed income, like how who might not have the space, people who are living in, like me, an apartment building, like where are they going to store their garbage? I'm fortunate enough that, I've got private um uh, waste removal right behind my
Okay.
building. It's a dumpster. But
Right.
also asking questions, how is the city going to hold those businesses accountable, right? Like how are the green bin strategies going to be implemented for people who, like me, live in an apartment building? And are there going to be green bins, like communal green bins in these buildings? How are we going to have any oversight over private industry, right? Like, and then where are people living in spaces where they're still getting their waste picked up by the city, but they might not have space to store this much garbage.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So I mean, there are a lot of legitimate questions because changes
Absolutely, yeah,
changes need to be made, and it's sure
yeah,
it's maybe easy for us to think about Mississauga or Burlington where these things are normal.
yeah.
But there was probably a time when they had to transition, and it caused the same hullabaloo,
Yes. Oh, I
right?
imagine. I've actually been meaning to ask my parents about that because I honestly don't remember when we switched
Yeah, me either.
when I was
As a
growing up.
kid, I just remember being really excited because I was going through my like social justice like in high school like environmentalism phase, like trying to switch all the light bulbs to fluorescence, which ended up not even being great for the environment anyways.
Right.
And yeah, so I can remember being excited about the switch, and I'm sure there probably are some young folks and some adults as well who are excited for this. What
Mhm.
exact changes are being made?
So the biggest one is that we're moving to bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks, garbage pickup, um, and that we're the implementation of a green bin program, which will be picked up weekly. And then in addition to the changes to garbage, we're moving towards clear bags, right? So the idea behind the clear bags is to sort of divert more recyclable waste away from landfill so that we're, saving and creating a more sustainable um, landfill, basically,
Okay,
right?
better landfills.
Better landfills, yeah, so that more waste that can be utilized to there was a really good delegation from blanking on the actual name of the organization at this moment, but where is it? You know, talking about uh, Composting Council of Canada.
Right. I did. Yeah,
Um,
I saw that.
yes, talking about the ways in which if Peterborough is to continue along this line and to create more, basically like create compost, it's going to create a more like it's going to revitalize the farming sector in and around the area, and that in that way, more local produce, better quality local produce, and along the ways that's going to be quite beneficial for the community. But
Amazing.
yeah, the
Yeah,
whole the
that's so
whole
exciting.
yeah,
It seems like so obvious as like a rural, like a more rural community. Obviously, we have our urban aspect to us as well, but it seems like so obvious. Like, why didn't we do this forever ago?
right, yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm glad we're doing it now. And yeah, I'm glad that compost will be better. I've never heard of the clear bags argument. Does that just mean that like you look in the bag and there's all this garbage and you're like, oh, there's some recyclable material in there. We'll open the bag, get that out, and then the rest will go to the landfill. Is
I
that
believe
basically
I
the
believe
deal?
that there's also a safety thing for the individuals who are going to be working collecting collecting waste as well. And within the clear bag, they're talking about you're allowed to have like a what they call a privacy bag, so a non-clear bag, which you can put your more delicate items in. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Nice. So when the
yeah,
police come searching through your garbage, they know which one to look in.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, all of your
That's right. All the secrets are in that black garbage bag and all the,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and right in front of your house too, so they know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm personally just like really excited for the composting program. Like they've been talking about it forever in Peterborough. A lot of people just compost in their backyard, if they
right.
if they if they have space. But obviously, a lot of people, like if you live in an apartment, you probably don't have that accessibility. Um, so glad that this will finally be something that's done citywide. What are some of the concerns? I mean, like, are there any concerns that maybe don't strike you as legitimate? Um,
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I mean,
because those are the
I
kind of
feel
funny
like
ones, I guess, to me. But
I feel like there's a lot of I feel like people when this happens, like they're thinking about right now, they can't picture a garbage bin not just absolutely reeking, right? Because that's been their experience the whole time. But when you're constantly removing the organic waste from your garbage, what
yeah,
you end up with is not really, it's not what you would think about as garbage, right? Like it's just like unrecyclable plastics and stuff like that, right? Like
yeah,
it's all the stuff that wouldn't smell anyways. And so the things that make garbage absolutely rancid are going to be collected weekly still, right? And
right.
I feel like people when they begin doing this and they begin setting their mind to it and it becomes a habit, they'll be amazed at how little garbage they actually have, right?
Yeah. Like I do that
Because right
now,
now,
and it
yeah,
was even like, oh, I was feeling so tired last week that I didn't even do the garbage, and I still don't even have a full garbage bag. That's for
right,
like a two-person household. It's
yeah,
like, wow, I don't even need of like we could probably do it once a month, really, with like how little garbage we're producing because we compost and recycle.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I grew up. My family's a family of five, and we had maybe one garbage bag every 2 weeks. But our green bin it was a big green bin, but we just build it up, and yeah, it does, yeah,
The thing that
yeah,
shocked me is someone was saying they were worried about an increase in rat infestation, specifically rats eating dirty diapers. And the
yes,
thought of that is awful.
yes.
But someone in chat was saying that maybe that's actually not a real thing. That I've never heard that rats eat
This
feces, but
this individual seemed very convinced that it was, and she has apparently. This is what kind of struck me funny. She was sending articles regarding this to Councillor Gary Baldwin. Um,
so Gary Baldwin's email is just full of shit. That was you're trying to
Basically, at
say.
this point,
Okay.
yeah. And at the end of this person's remarks, Baldwin thanked her, but he didn't mention the articles or anything like that. So
Okay.
thank you for coming out and bringing this to our attention. But
Yeah. I hope it was full of like pictures, like photographic evidence as
I
well.
hope so. She literally told council to Google rat infestations and diapers. Rats and diapers. Google that, and you will apparently be
Yeah.
be inundated. Um, whether I can't speak to whether or not rats eat human feces. I That was news to me.
Okay, yeah.
Fascinating,
Now
fascinating if true.
someone in chat is saying rats like dog poo because there's dog food in it. Which I
Mhm.
guess I could see being true. I don't even know. We don't really have many rats in Peterborough as far as I know. I don't know,
Not
maybe
yet, Danny. Not yet.
no, yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, we'll see. We'll be like the next New York, I guess. The
Yeah,
the sixth borough
perhaps.
or whatever.
Yeah,
Peterborough.
yeah, and
So,
I feel like this delegate's concerns are very much rooted in like a genuine concern for the fact that the city needs to think about how to deal with this kind of waste, right? Like diaper waste, human waste, pet waste, like
yeah.
feces, right? That is true. Whether or not it's going to cause a rat infestation, I can't speak to, but I do think that she has a genuine point. I
Yeah, for sure. I shouldn't downplay it. It's just like the image is disgusting. Yeah, people are
yes,
saying
yeah.
there is an increase in rats in Peterborough, or at least when they change to these programs. And I mean, they have like cited other cities who have transitioned and found
Yes.
there is an increase in rats. So it is, as much as we're joking about it, it's very serious. Dog poop will be collected is what someone else is saying, and yeah, it sounds like maybe yeah, maybe obviously the solutions exist. It will just be transitioning that I think will be a bit tricky.
Yes. Yeah. And at an earlier, when this was initially being proposed to council during the general committee meeting, questions did arise about whether or not the Peterborough facility, the city, but the facilities that deal with Peterborough and the surrounding counties waste, if it has the capacity to deal with pet waste, and the answer is yes at this point. Yeah. So
Okay, good to
yeah.
know. Good to know. I'm not someone who has a pet, but I'm sure that would definitely be a concern. We should get into some of the questions. If you're in chat right
Yeah,
now and you have a question, please let us know. But I also did a shout out on Twitter last night asking
I
for some
saw that.
questions. And the first one here is from Robert Gibson, and they're asking, has the city of Peterborough been following the guidelines of the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities which it joined? What is and is not being done to meet the objectives of the coalition? So now, if you're unaware, the
Good
Coalition of
question.
Municipalities is this kind of relates back to the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like basically a, signing up to agree that you'll work towards improving policies against like racism, discrimination, exclusion, and intolerance. Right? Do you know if the city is doing anything in this regard, or maybe they're deferring?
I think the this is a very important and great topical question. The answer I think you've already kind of said, they're kind of deferring it. Um, my answer, and this is going to reveal my politics, is they could always be doing more. They should always be doing more, and we need to keep pushing them to do more. If we're signing up to something like the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, then there's always going to be work. And this is again echoing what Diane said, and you brought up, right, Danny, that it's not a one-time thing. You don't pass a motion, like even if this deferred motion passes, there's still going to be more, right? So
Yeah.
so
Okay.
the answer I suppose is no, they're not doing enough, and they need to do more, and they should always be doing more. That's
Okay.
that's me.
Good answer. Good
Uh,
answer. And yeah, I agree. Um, Another question from Robert Gibson here. In light of several U.S. states being hostile to diversity and equity training and attacks on transgender and non-binary people, what does the deferred decision say about Peterborough being complicit in systemic inequality?
yeah, so that's I should say too. I mean, Robert does a lot of work for Arthur as well, and I
Okay.
think
Okay. Yes, that is true.
um, this is again a good question, but it's kind of leading towards an answer that I think is kind of like a presupposed like conclusion that that the Peterborough City is complicit in systemic racism, which I'm not going to exactly
All
push
right.
back against,
Yeah.
right? I think like in the context of this deferral, a deferral doesn't mean that it's been defeated. It means that it will be picked up at a later date. And again, everyone's gonna get very tired of me saying this, but politics is so slow, right? It's so
Right.
so slow.
But that's why
Uh,
we need to have this show to make it fast, exciting,
yeah,
accessible, and
yes,
and
yeah,
get people hyped up about it. This
yeah,
is like
yeah. People should get it.
politics
Yeah,
on, I
on
won't
something,
say.
on coffee.
Oh, that's right. A very well
Yeah,
caffeinated politics.
yeah.
Um,
Uh, but I again, like the impetus to kind of compare ourselves to the United States, I never really like having that discussion because it seems to me like within 5 years we're just doing what they're doing. So we should kind of, I don't know. It's an interesting question on it from the point of view of I think it says, yeah, I'm not quite sure how to go about answering that. It's
That's fair. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a big question. We might not be able to get to it here.
yeah, it's a massive question.
So another question. This is from Socialist Flamethrower on Twitter. Can we talk about how tiny homes are a big part of the answer? Tiny home villages, tiny homes in front yards, backyards, and public space. How can zoning and laws change to facilitate this?
I wish I had more background and information on where this is being implemented in other municipalities and across Canada. I'm aware
Yeah.
that is kind of part of the answer, and that Peterborough has attempted to bring this about as a solution. Council doesn't seem really open to supporting such a move.
Right. Now, whatever happened to the tiny homes that were all ready to go and they were looking for a place for them? Have we kind of like just lost track of that story a bit?
I feel like I personally I haven't heard a lot about what's happening with Path Peterborough Action for Tiny Homes, um, and whether or not that's moving forward. The council decided not to support the initial implementation of that, and then in the following meeting, they decided to not support the coalition of community groups, of which Path was not a part. Um, so I'm not quite sure where Path is standing at this point in time and whether or not that's moving forward, because I think they're in need of a location at this point. Um,
Right.
there's a there I mean, council has the power to kind of and part of the motion that this kind of came through and was eventually defeated. I mean, it was Councillor Alex Burke, who put this to council. It was included within that was bypassing certain bylaws, certain applications that Path would have had to go down. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
really sure.
Yeah, and I guess I mean even just to talk about it in a general sense, like I think that tiny homes are part of the solution, but they're not a long-term solution, right? And it is a shame that we are not comfortable enough to consider it even as like a half measure or a band-aid on a crisis. It's really not meeting the root of the problem, but
Mhm.
and for a lot of times I would say, hey, we need to get to the root of the problem, but along the way, there are vulnerable people who need access to just like a warm space. And maybe why we're not hearing about it is because really the opportunity to do something did kind of just like pass, and the people who needed probably access to those safe spaces, they needed it over the winter. And we once kind of became evident that that wasn't going to happen, maybe it deflated the political will for something to happen there, which is really unfortunate. I always want to think that we're doing like everything we can within our power. Um, just to follow up, my own personal question is, what happened to the last week? You said that Alex Bierk posted a motion for $200,000 to be allocated to the shelters downtown, and was there any follow up on that at this council?
Um, so that, if memory serves, that's a motion that yeah, that's a motion that came out of the budget process, right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
so that was ratified when the budget was ratified.
Okay,
So for some more context there, um, yeah, there's a whole one of the Arthur journalists, David King, wrote an article about this. More or less what and we did talk about this last week, I think, too, the kind of political maneuvering that Alex Burke kind of performed for us all, right? So it's
yeah, yeah.
taking taking money away from from a budget line for the downtown business improvement area to then immediately like implement a suggested policy from city staff to hire workers at the shelters, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
That
I just
that
wanted to
that
just acknowledge
yeah,
that, at least like maybe something is being done along in this
yes,
direction, and
yeah.
we can, you know, so yeah, I guess maybe, yeah, you're right. There's, I guess, no follow up to it. I thought I had saw maybe something about it. But yes, these are long, boring meetings. I guess this one wasn't long, but we do
No, it
appreciate you
wasn't.
being
The
there on the ground.
Yeah.
Um Jackie, the typo queen of Peterborough, is
Hey,
has a
Jackie.
question here. Discuss the lack of leadership by Jeff Leal PTBO thus far. What seems like a turnaround by Councillor Hack in this vote to drop the DEI deferral. I applaud him. So yeah, we did acknowledge that. Sorry, not Hack, but Hakey, Councillor Hakey, did have a turnaround. Maybe he was inspired or moved by some of the delegates. Maybe someone had the talking to him since the incident. Jackie is also here live in chat saying howdy. Hi, Jackie. And yeah, what do you think about the lack of leadership from Jeff Leal? Would you characterize it as that?
I would not characterize it necessarily as a lack of leadership. I feel like it's he I mean this is a subjective question, you know, like Jeff Leal has his reasons for doing certain things. And he is very transparent about that. This is not out of character for him to kind of defer something until he gets to hear from more people, right, directly from council. It's just kind of part and parcel with his leadership style. Whether or not that's a lack of leadership is kind of not really like I can't speak to whether or not it is. It depends upon what people determine it is leadership is. And I think, you know, I would prefer if he had voted. I think that would have been um, probably for the best, but
Yeah.
here we are.
It is weird to me to play this like slow game, especially on things that are largely symbolic. Like I
That's
feel like
yeah,
this would have been just like an easy
yeah.
360 through the legs slam dunk for Jeff
Oh
Leal
yeah,
to be like, I am virtue signaling my best.
yeah,
But
100%.
and just
Yeah.
like why not really, it was like
Mhm.
what do you really need to listen to an expert tell you that, hey,
No.
DEI would be good?
No, probably not. And you know, there's an argument to be made there that by putting Rima Lee in the position that she's about to be put in within this context is also kind of indicative of like why are you making like the diversity, equity, inclusion officer come and talk to you about why you should include diversity, equity? Like how is that going to benefit? What else is she going to say other than yes?
Yeah,
Why would you
exactly.
put this person in a position such as that? So in that sense, yeah, it does kind of speak of a lack of, you know, a lack to, yeah, like a lack of ability to kind of, you know, just come up, like, rally the counselors and say, come on, look, guys, this is symbolic at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Let's just do this, you know? Um, and yeah, I mean, even Joy La Chica, when I spoke to her after council, um, you know, she was like, this would have been this, like, it strikes me like this would have been so easy. You know, she can't wrap her mind around it. Like a lot of us can't wrap our minds around why such a small thing has been made into a rather large issue.
Right.
But that's politics, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. Can you
It's
tell us a little
frustrating.
more about Reem Ali?
Yeah, I don't know too much about her. I believe she started her position in 2020 or 2021, I believe, and her position was recently made um, permanent uh, by city
Okay.
staff. I believe it was initially a 2-year pilot program, so I guess it would have been 2021 because we're in 2023 now. Um, yeah, I've never had the opportunity to meet her though, although I anticipate that I will in the coming weeks, which will be very interesting.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
What about, you know what? I think there is unfortunately something we missed because they are replacing Sandra Clancy, right, as
Yes.
chief administrative officer.
Yes, they are. Yes, yes.
Which I think for many progressives in Peterborough is kind of just like fist bump, like yes, thank goodness,
Yeah,
like, but also
yeah.
like oh, like, oh no, who are they going to appoint? Um
Yes,
I know
yes.
that they have hired like the same firm that hired the chief of police.
Yeah.
So I guess like how do they make these decisions? Who gets these jobs, which are literally like some of the cushiest jobs in government that you can find. And they're not democratically elected
Mhm.
people, but they have a lot of power and they get a lot of money for the job that they do or don't do in some cases.
In some cases. Yeah. So this is part of the interesting thing of covering City Hall too, right? Because like at the beginning of meetings, the councillors will have been in closed session, and then they have to come out and ratify the proceedings of closed session publicly. And the motions that they're passing are extremely vague. So the only thing that we know at this point is that they've hired a Toronto firm called Phelps Grove as the recruitment firm to begin the process of finding Sandra Clancy's replacement, and we know who is going to be sitting on the committee, the hiring committee for her, for the I shouldn't say her for the next CAO of Peterborough. So that includes Mayor Leal and then councillors Duguay, Beamer, and Parnell. So interesting assortment of characters,
How
perhaps.
come how come they get to choose?
I suppose that we don't know. I might be able to ask.
Is
Maybe
this
I'll
not
make a point of
something
asking that.
is this not something that council as a whole should decide? I mean, not that we have a diverse council, but this
Yeah,
seems like a particularly uh conservative, undiverse, you know, final four.
yeah. The fact that neither Burke or Lachika are on it strikes me as sort of swaying things to a certain political side of things. Yeah, I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right there. Yeah,
Okay, so maybe that's our homework for next week.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
why do they get to choose? And like
yeah,
this is like a pretty important decision for them to make.
yeah. It's going to be a massive decision. I eventually, I imagine like the hiring will be approved by council as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, However, yeah, the hiring committee itself, you're absolutely right. It,
Okay.
it leans
Yeah.
it leans a certain way.
Interesting, interesting. All
Yeah.
right. Well, it's been just about an hour. We should probably wrap it up.
Mhm.
However, what is like your time looking like? Do we have time for drama?
Time for drama?
Yeah, because I know that we didn't talk about drag story time for one thing,
Oh my goodness.
and we
Yeah.
didn't talk about, the Arthur
Holy
drama,
crap.
which we can
No.
just like put aside. But there are you regretting being affiliated with me yet? Because I saw something on Twitter that was basically like, wow, Sebastian, I can see that they have talked to Danny Taro and they
Yeah.
all work at the Arthur together, so you must be a
Mm.
horrible person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was suggested, like, Sebastian doesn't know what he's doing because I saw this 30-second clip where he asks one question and therefore he doesn't know how to be a journalist, you know? Twitter's hilarious. And I mean, these people,
Yeah.
I kid my kind of like I'm very new to Twitter. Like I've had Twitter for a long time, but I don't use it really until like very recently. And my goal is just to be the most boring person on Twitter, like not engage with anything. Just say, yeah, if you want to say that, you can. I don't know why you would, right? Like, frankly, like
Yep.
these people don't know me from a hole in the ground, but they've decided that I'm a very biased journalist. Like, why did you ask that question? Did you ask it of others? I'm like, yeah, of course I did. What do you think I'm doing? Like,
Yes. The
and
the funny thing is that the person you asked that question to also asked a very similar question to Betty Baker, because it's a perfectly valid question, I suppose, but they
yeah,
didn't get the same backlash as you got. Now, the
yeah.
question that you asked was simply like, do you think your presence here is a, I don't know, how did you phrase it, a net
Yeah,
positive or negative? But
I more or
yeah,
less asked, like, do you feel like, and again, I talked to Karima for about 5 to 7 minutes or so, right? And what was posted online is a very short portion of that, right? So that's not really journalism because you're lacking context. That's a whole other discussion.
you mean
As to
clipping something
what
out of context isn't good journalism?
this is shocking, Danny, but no. Um,
Yeah.
so I more or less asked the question, based on, what had happened the previous month, do you feel like your presence here is distracting from the overall goal of the event, i.e., like solidarity with Betty Baker and a positive celebration for children and families, right? You don't get that entire context from the clip that was posted, right? Um, and, again, like Karima didn't have to talk to me, just like I didn't have to talk to her. I decided to because I thought it would be interesting. Um, Based
Yeah.
on your discussions that you had with her, and and I it's very, very, it's fascinating, you know.
Yeah, it's like something to keep an eye on. We all
Yeah,
have our suspicions, or in some cases maybe conclusions, but
yeah,
it's I think a question that is not unfair to ask, and like we should all in a way consider, like, hey, is my presence here causing harm, or am I acting in good faith and in solidarity
yeah,
with the people that are here, to fight for their rights. So
yeah,
I think it's a perfectly valid question. It's a shame that some people on Twitter felt the need to I don't know, criticize you unjustly for an out
yeah.
of context clip, but that is
That's
the
what happens on
age.
Twitter, right?
Yeah, that is what happens on Twitter. It's funny that you are trying to be the most boring person on Twitter. I like to start a little bit of drama, maybe, but you also have to like not give too much energy into it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
now that you've partnered yourself with me, you might find, that now you're in more drama.
yeah. Well, I imagine I've never been in any Twitter drama before, so this is all very new to me. And I will
Okay.
say, like, again, along the lines of like posting things out of context and calling it journalism, i.e., what Karima does, and I think she's also very, she's simultaneously very aware of what she's doing and very uncritical of what she's doing, which I find not ideal. I'll put it that way. But I
Yeah.
also think like it's frustrating to see like if she is actually a journalist as she proclaims herself to be, or a lawyer satirist, then retweeting responses from different people calling out journalists for being biased or not real journalists or anything like that, like it shows a genuine lack of solidarity within the ranks of journalists, which I could leave that alone. I could do without that. I could do without the lack of solidarity on behalf of Karima, but I can just leave it at
Yeah.
that.
I think a good way to maybe summarize it. A lack of solidarity.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um
rather individualistic and opportunistic.
Yeah, and I think as someone who tries to create media every day, like I'm like my own worst critic, and I'm sure it's the same for you when you're doing this
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
Even in the context of this podcast episode, I'm thinking constantly like, oh, we should do this better. We should do this better. We should
Mhm.
we should
Yep.
try to improve our own process and think critically about like the about what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that maybe it's completely void of that. I think maybe it is there, but it's just the motivations behind it are not always uh in good faith, I suppose. This is
Yeah.
like saying a lot without saying too much, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, sorry that you got dragged into the Twitter
Oh no.
drama.
It was kind of made for an interesting weekend over what was already a very interesting weekend,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
So I
Yeah.
know. Anything else you want to add on to today's episode?
No, I think just, thanks for listening, people in the audience, I yeah, more will be revealed, and I hope people don't get bored of me, bringing back like the slowness of all of this, right? Like
Stop
just know
saying
that
that. We need to stop telling people this is going to be slow. No. This is going to be fast, exciting, highly caffeinated politics. All right? We need to work on our own branding. Peterborough has their own branding. This podcast is where the action is. All right? There's nothing slow about this podcast, okay?
there's nothing slow about the podcast, but the things we're talking about are fundamentally very slow.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
fundamentally. And as journalists, we can't sensationalize, we can't be doing that.
All right, all right. There's a that is It's a valid criticism. I love how I've completely gone against what I was just saying. I'm like, we need to think critically. I'm like, we need to also sensationalize to get the views. Oh, but yeah, okay, all right. All right. The voice of reason on both Twitch and Twitter and at the Arthur newspaper. Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Absolutely. My pleasure.